Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 180, and I have a very special decode to share with you all. Really excited to get into today's podcast. Hope you're all having an amazing weekend out there. And if you are new here to the Wolfpack, welcome. So great to have you here with us. If you've yet to get access to the Discord server, just go ahead and send me a direct message here on Patreon with your Discord username, and I will reply back to you in a Patreon direct message with your Discord server invite. Please don't comment below or email me for Discord access. I won't be able to help you out that way. And we'll be covering about 5 different altcoins in today's Red Pill, but just so you're aware, if you want to know how we vote on these altcoins every week, just go to the comments section below this Patreon post and submit the name of the project and the ticker symbol. And whatever gets the most thumbs up or upvotes from community members, I will be selecting for next week's Red Pill podcast. Please make sure that we haven't covered that specific altcoin in at least 3 months. This gives us some new data to work with whenever we look at it again. So we'll be checking out Arbitrum, Spell Token, Chiliz, Pepe, interestingly enough, as well as Coinbase Incorporated. So we'll be checking out Coin stock. We rarely check out stocks, but got a lot of votes this week. Kind of was interesting for me to see such a thing. So we'll be checking that out as well to wrap up today's podcast. But without any further ado, let's get straight into today's Red Pill. Just make sure you get comfortable. Get relaxed, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little bit earlier out there, or a glass of wine or beer, or any beverage of your choice. I'm going with some coconut water today. Not as boring as my usual water. So let's get into it. If you remember how I kicked off last week's Red Pill, you'll remember me mentioning the number 36. Tied to 3 6s being 666, since we were moving into the 36th week of the year, which we're concluding today. And boy, was it a hell of a week in the markets. Allegedly, the traditional market's experiencing some of its biggest single week losses since 2008. And I believe, or I'm going to go ahead and assume that data is based off of overall dollar amount of losses and not just based on percentages. So market cap losses in particular sectors across particular indices. But nonetheless, it was a spicy week in the market, and the crypto market took a hit as well, although most cryptocurrencies held their August lows, or what I was calling the August new moon flash crash. And of course, we'll discuss current market conditions throughout today's podcast. A little bit later, we'll be getting into the traditional TA. But in my last update from earlier this week, just the update post that I shared over on Patreon, I mentioned some dates to keep an eye out for, so we're going to quickly recap some of that. We have September 11th and the connection for this upcoming September 11th date, being that it has the same date numerology as Donald Trump's assassination attempt, which was on the 13th of July. As you can see here, 64 double-digit date numerology and 19 standard date numerology. And this also happens to be the same date numerology as Donald Trump's birthday this year, which was on the 14th of June. As you can see, still the same date numerology, 64 double-digit and 19 standard numerology before reduction. And the mirror of this number 64 ties specifically to Trump because the mirror is 46 and he was born in 1946. Of course, he'll be in this upcoming Royal Rumble called the US Selection in November. So a lot of prana is flowing to him this year. And we're going to be talking about him a little bit more in today's podcast because there's some important data to share regarding the overall decode I have prepared for you all. Another thing to mention about 9/11 in just a couple of days is it will be the 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 ritual. 23 is the 9th prime number. The number 9 is the number of spatial infinity. It's a number that always comes back to itself. You could look into the 369 code if you haven't already, but for instance, you have 9 times 2, it's 18. So you double the 9, 18 reduces to 9, 1 plus 8. Then you double the 18, you get 36. 3 plus 6 is 9. You double that again, and you keep seeing as you double 72, 144, etc. It's always coming back to 9. So it could almost be considered the number of the ego regarding the number 9. It's very powerful, and the 23 is esoteric, revealing that 9. I believe it's a big reason why you had that number 23 tied to Michael Jordan, considered the GOAT. The GOAT considered tied back to Baphomet and all of that good stuff. But let's keep today's decode going. So then we have a couple days after this September 11th date, which again just synchronizes with the date numerology of those 2 key events tied to Trump, his birthday this year, of course, presidential election this year with him in it, and his assassination attempt just a month after that. Well, we also have a couple days after this would be the 13th of September, which is a Friday the 13th. And a wild piece of code that I have for you today is in regards to this upcoming Friday the 13th tied to October 7th of last year. This was the date that Israel declared war on Hamas, and one of the most significant events leading into what we could call World War III. Well, including the end date, this is 343 days apart, and 343 is a very powerful number because it's 7 times 7 times 7, giving you that 343, as well as it being 49 weeks apart, and 49 is 7 squared, 7 sevens. It's also during the 37th week of the year, as you can see here, and 37 esoterically is 3 sevens. 777 becomes 21. So 777 is your jackpot number. That 777 or jackpot number could be tied to the number 37, again, esoterically. But 7 plus 7 plus 7 becomes 21. And this Friday the 13th that we're talking about happens to be on a 21 date numerology. And this Friday the 13th also connects to Rosh Hashanah, which is on the 3rd of October this year. And it's connected by 21 days, tied to the 21 date numerology, the mirror of 21 becoming 12, tied to this date as well. Mirrored, kind of like a palindrome effect, if you will. So you're already probably aware, because you've heard me say it millions of times, this particular Rosh Hashanah is very powerful. This Hebrew New Year is going to be very powerful because it's right there after the solar eclipse on October 2nd, which I do believe is one of the most important dates for the market. This will be the final solar eclipse of our solar cycle before we move into our lunar cycle on March 13th, 2025, next year. Now, getting back to the October 7th connection for last year and this upcoming Friday the 13th, you could also see that it equals 11 months and 7 days. And this is where we go a little bit deeper into the code, because this is going to tie to the exoteric September 11th code. We were just talking about September 11th moments ago. Well, you have September. It starts with the prefix septem, and that is 7 in Latin. And this being on the 11th day, it actually makes the 9/11 day 11/7. Okay, you would have it be the 117 ritual, the 117 code, not 9/11. And then here we have another 117 code, 11 months and 7 days between this very important event that happened last year on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, after the last Jubilee. Again, Jubilee is a 50-year cycle, so this whole ritual and war starting at this exact time, on this exact date, was not a coincidence. It was scripted. And we have it connecting to September 13th by all of these crucial codes. First of all, September is the 7. We have the 7, the 11, the 117 tied to September 11th. We have the 343. That's 7 times 7 times 7, and 49 weeks, 7 sevens. How many more sevens could I possibly give you between two dates? Oh, and by the way, we're speaking on the 7th day of October. So pretty incredible stuff. I mean, we even have it the 21st day, 777 equals 21 regarding the numerology, excuse me. Also, speaking of war, we have a couple days after this on September 15th, it will be a 68 double-digit date numerology, and this is what I call the war code. We have all of the significant events on our world stage in the past 100 years always have the number 68 or 86 tied to it. And this also has the 23 standard date numerology, which is tied to this upcoming 9/11. We were talking about this 23 being the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. And that right there is really something to consider, how this number 23 was something that we all dealt with last year in the 23 year, in the Hebrew year that reduced down to 23. We've left that energy. And I'm not trying to say that 23 has become a positive number, if it's something to look at from a positive perspective, but we did have an event this year that shares the same exact date numerology that was quite negative, and it was May 19th, and that was the date that the Iranian president died in that mysterious helicopter crash, and you could see it has the 68, 68, 23, 23, and they both happened on a Sunday. So we have right now, Turkey is on the brink of entering this World War III. Just keep that in mind, because I remember vividly, I told everyone, watch out for Iran, and lots of events tied to Iran. We were able to get the drone strike between Iran to Israel on the exact time frame that it happened, and giving the shout out to this May 19th date because it had the 68-23 combo, and we had what happened with Iran right after that drone strike. So we have potential kind of code here for Turkey, and I wouldn't be surprised if things start to get even more spicy on this particular date because it is a war code. Now, let's move forward a little bit. We also have the next key date range to consider. Before, I just gave you the date of 9/11, had the synchronicity with the 64 and 19 date numerology tied to specifically Trump. Then we had the following Friday, which would be Friday the 13th. I showed you all the code of that. We just talked about the 15th. And then now we're going to be entering the 38th week of the year. So this is a date range that I've actually called out a long time ago. The number 38 is well, let me take this one step at a time because there's a lot to discuss here. First and foremost, the 38th week of the year has the upcoming eclipse. This eclipse will be between the 17th and 18th. It is just a partial lunar eclipse, but we have been talking about it regarding the pair of eclipses month to month that we typically see around this stage in the crypto bull cycle. So go back and watch the last red pill if you haven't already. That will fill you in a lot of that. Now, the next thing would be the connection to the 17th and 18th that I shared in my last red pill. That was regarding the FOMC meeting that's coming up. Also, the first initial date of Trump's sentencing, which did get delayed. And now that it was delayed, it's really building up another set of today's decode section for today's decode, which I think is going to be really interesting for you guys, and that's discussing this upcoming election cycle. Since now we know that this sentencing for Trump has been pushed past Super Tuesday, it will be after November 5th. So I have a lot to share with that. We could pretty much consider today's decode to be a US election decode special because I will be getting into that a little bit later. Not to get so caught up in the cyclone and vortex of the drama of the selection, but moreover to just answer some frequently asked questions I receive and to give you guys all the code that I've stumbled upon so that you guys can go do your own decoding if you're interested in that type of stuff. I'm not the most interested in politics, and I try to stay away from it as much as possible, focus on my own purpose, focus on what, allows me to have the life that I deem best without, being too divided from the people. It seems that all politics really has accomplished is dividing people. And I want to do my part to bring people together. But anyways, this 38th week of the year thing, very powerful. We have the upcoming lunar eclipse also on the same exact dates as we have the FOMC meeting. And it's one of the key dates that I mentioned in the last red pill. Very, very thoroughly went through a decode on the 17th and 18th. So again, check that out. But to quickly recap, the number 38, esoterically, it's 3 8s. That's 888 becomes 24. We're in the Gregorian year of 24. We're in the Hebrew year 5784, which reduces to 24. You've heard me say this so many times. And this shout out to the 38th week of the year was something that I brought up all the way back at the beginning of February this year when I released my Year of the Dragon Decoded over 7 months ago. And here we are, about a week out from this key time frame. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And since I brought up the number 24 and its significance, well, tomorrow, September 9th, this is going to be tied to the upcoming solar eclipse by 24 days. So keep this in mind. If you don't include the end date, it will be tied 24 days to Rosh Hashanah, to the last day of the Hebrew year 5784, which interestingly enough lands on 89 days left in the year, and 89 is your 24th prime number. So you have that 24 connection there, and then you have your 24 connection from this date to this date. Again, only working with 2 dates. Pretty powerful stuff. And we were talking about the 38th week of the year. That's 888 becomes 24. And this, we were talking about it in regards to this week here, 38th week in the year, which actually starts with a 24 date numerology. So it's pretty incredible how synchronized this all is. And this has a lot to do with September. It's always a powerful month. And now that I brought that up, let's check in with this stock market bar graph that I've been sharing throughout this year. You'll actually see the title here is September of presidential election years are not all that bad. The reason I've been showing you guys this throughout the year is because we are in a presidential election year, and there was a lot of patterns that we've heard people talk about, but here's the data. You know, it's as exoteric as it could possibly be, but it's the numbers, and they don't lie. So the title here is just because, interestingly enough, you'll see that most years, September is actually the worst performing month in the history of the stock market. But during election years, which are these red bars, it's not the case. Actually ends in a green month. But when we check in with the S&P chart on the monthly as of today, we're going to see that things are looking a little dicey. We have over here about 4.25% in the red already, and it's September 8th. So not the typical presidential election year data, but of course it's only September 8th, and we have at least 3 more weeks to close out this month. And look at how August went, where we had a pretty big drawdown and also finished the month on a brand new all-time high on a monthly candle. Now, hammer candle, there's things to say. I mean, not the most textbook, but yeah, this type of absorption is very bullish when you see this big tail to the downside that gets bought up into a green candle that closes higher than the prior green candle. I mean, yeah. And not even that necessarily. It's just closing on new highs, and the trend is your friend until the trend reverses. So yes, we've started off this month a little bit dramatic, but we're only a week into the month, and we have at least 3 more weeks to close out the month, and a lot could change in 3 weeks, especially in a market environment like this. And we have the upcoming FOMC meeting, as mentioned earlier, on September 17th through 18th. Fed Chair Powell speaks on the 18th, which happens to be the upcoming lunar eclipse. How interesting. And many speculate this will be our first rate cut of the year. But remember, it's the Fed's job to act as their stewards of damage control, and they love to posture themselves as if they're in the crisis management squad. So if this market continues to slide into the lunar eclipse, then I'd suspect the FOMC meeting will be more about damage control than anything else. They love to keep the market on life support, and we're in an everything bubble, but it's not really due to collapse just yet. Typically, when we see these crazy collapses, it's during a Shemitah year, and we're not in one. We were in one just a couple of years ago, from September 2021 to September 2022. And in this red box was the Shemitah year. And look at how it went. Started it off pretty bullish, but then we had a pretty big correction, one of the biggest corrections we've seen in quite a while, especially when considering monthly closes, not just, wicks and tails or the extremes of the data. So getting out at the beginning of a Shemitah and sell and getting back in at the end of the Shemitah, life-changing stuff. And we've seen that to be the case a lot of times, at least effectively a year after in some cases. And we've had all the biggest crisis moments in the market happen around a Shemitah year, within the year. We had the dot-com bubble crash, we had the housing market crisis, we had the Chinese markets, or the Asian markets, really in 2015. The 1988, we had Black Monday. There's so many examples. 1993 wasn't a whole lot going on with the stock market, but the bond market crash. So yeah, that's one of the things that we've brought to the world here on this channel back about almost 4 years ago now. And since we're no longer in the Shemitah, that's why I don't talk about it. There's no point of talking about something that we're not in. And the one thing about the synchronicity of the year of the dragon analysis with the Shemitah, well, that was the case back in 2000. That's why I don't really feel like we're in the dot-com bubble vibe right now, because we had these overlap. You'll see this green box was the year of the dragon, whilst this red box was the Shemitah year. This was a combination of things, and many things went down during this year of 2001. We had 9/11, U.S. invading Afghanistan, going into war, what became a war that was ongoing all the way until C-19, fucking 20 years almost. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, we're not in that mode right now. We've had an incredibly bullish, actually, post-Shemitah timeframe. If you look at from the moment the Shemitah ended to where we're at right now, mind-blowing gains. Getting back to this, with that being said, let's do a quick recap on the Year of the Dragon analysis for the S&P 500 so we can review the pattern that we see for this time of the year that we're in now as we move into Q4. And we'll be starting with 2012 and working our way backwards all the way to about 1940, the Year of the Dragon that was at the early stages of World War II. So we're starting here with 2012. You can see where we're at right now, by the way, is September 8th. Let's see where September 8th was over here. We were actually on our way up into pivoting right on Rosh Hashanah, and then we did have a more significant correction a couple of weeks after the US election. So keep that in mind. We topped out pretty much in September, corrected into mid-November, and then we ended off the Year of the Dragon higher than where we were in September, continuing an uptrend. Now let's go back to the year 2000. You guys all know about this year. It was the dot-com bubble crash. We went up into August, right there at the beginning of September. So again, the pattern of September. Correction throughout all of the rest of the year, and then really once the Shemitah kicked off, we just broke down. But again, we're not in a Shemitah this year, although I will be bringing up the year 2000 a little bit later when I get into this election cycle decode. Then we have 1988. It was after the Black Monday event, which happened in October. Here we can see pretty much holding an uptrend throughout. We made it up all the way into October. Had a little bit of a correction though before Rosh Hashanah, which is very much mimicking what we're experiencing right now. Went up higher into October, correction into pretty much the same time, November 16th, in the last iteration of the year 2012. It was the 15th of November, right after the election. And then we ended off the Year of the Dragon higher than where we were at the start, or higher than where we were in the, prior highs. Now let's make our way over to 76. And you're going to see we topped out in September, right around Rosh Hashanah. Then we had a correction into the second, third week of November, and then we went up a little bit higher into the end of the year. Had kind of like this double top effect, but the correction did come down all the way into the same time we saw the prior iteration in 1988 and in the year 2012. Now we're going to be going back to 1964, which we're going to pause here for a minute and explain some of the election decode stuff that I wanted to get into today, because 1964 was the year that Kamala Harris was allegedly born in 64. The mirror of the year Trump was born, 46. And what's so fascinating about 1964 is that it was the last Wood Dragon year. And we're in the Wood Dragon year now. And during that presidential election, Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat, won in a landslide victory. And remember, he was president the year earlier, actually, right after the JFK assassination, he was sworn in. And we just had the Trump assassination attempt this year. So very interesting parallels, along with Kamala Harris being born this year, right? Now, a lot of members here have pointed out the significance of 1972. We're going to be going over to that year over here, which, by the way, 72 in September was a Shemitah. So we don't have that this year. We did back then, but let's just say to entertain the people that are considering this data, we are going to quickly look at 1972. Some of the pattern here, we moved up into late August, corrected into around October, mid-October, and also finished off the year pretty bullish on new highs. So that's another pattern that works well with our Year of the Dragon analysis. But also, the reason for bringing up 1972 also has to do with the landslide victory for Richard Nixon, a Republican. And many of you know I've brought up the connections to this recent Olympics in Paris just quite recently, and the 1972 Munich massacre. And this was something I decoded thoroughly in my Year of the Dragon Decoded that was released 6 months before the Olympics even happened. So it's interesting to see how that all went down, because the big event then in the Munich massacre was a terrorist event between a Palestinian militant group and the Israeli Olympic team. And then we had, for this Paris Olympics, the leader of Hamas effectively was taken out during that Olympics. So it was big projection back to that time frame of 72, which is, of course, why I'm keeping an open mind to 1972 as well with this overall data that we have here. So it's interesting to see how this election in 1972 went compared to the one in 1964, which was the year of the Wood Dragon, the year that Kamala Harris was born, both years having landslide victories and one for each party. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the last truly landslide victory in a US election was in 1984 with Ronald Reagan, also a Republican. And most elections over the past 40 years since that election have not been that way. So I'd suspect that the apex predator knows it's best for them to siphon as much prana from the populace as possible and keep things close. Meaning I'm not expecting a landslide victory this time around. Just getting that out of the way early. And one thing that I've brought up many times had to do with this recent Super Bowl in 2024. Kind of weird thing to bring up if you are brand new here. It might be confusing to you, but if you're somebody who's been around following this channel for any length of time over the past maybe 6 months or so, you've probably heard me bring up this once in a while. But if you were following the channel back during February, the beginning of this year, then you definitely heard me talk about it a lot, and how these big major sporting events are coded into the way things are going in the script on the world stage, including things like war, blackout rituals that happen. I mean, pretty much everything I've noticed comes down to these big sporting events. They're telling us a story in plain sight because the truth doesn't hide. So we have this 2024 Super Bowl event, and I just want to do this as best I can without going through so many different moving parts to keep things simple. So please follow along. One thing that I've brought up about this recent Super Bowl, where the 49ers lost against the Chiefs in overtime, and it was the second Super Bowl ever to go into overtime. And this was also the second time the 49ers went against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And the one before the recent one was in the year 2020, So it was in 2020, and that was the last election where Biden and Trump were against each other, and Biden won. Okay, so remember, 49ers lost, Biden wins. So kind of an interesting thing to consider, and I'm going to share some more data bringing in this element of sports, and maybe we're onto something here. So this election that happened had tons of controversy, right? Especially with that dramatic event of January 6th, the Capitol ritual, and all the stuff regarding election fraud. And then we have what happened in the year 2000, where there was a recount in Florida with Bush and Al Gore. And as we reviewed moments ago, the year 2000 was a year of the dragon, just like it is this year, which definitely flares up my intuition for this upcoming election. I'm really feeling like if this election goes through without some crazy ritual happening right before it, then I could see a ritual happening during it. And this will, of course, obstruct the voting process and prevent the votes from being counted accurately, or whatever buzzword salad they want to feed us. You know how it goes. And I think we could already agree that we've already had a big ritual right before the election, and that was the staged assassination of Donald Trump, which maybe didn't go according to plan. I'm not here to say that I believe it was supposed to happen or not supposed to happen, or he planned for it to happen. I don't want to go down that road. You know, people could have fun with the conspiracies, but at the end of the day, we have what happened and we have where we're at today. So what are we working with? What ingredients are we working with, right? So there's a couple ways to assume how this could all go down, but I very much feel that it's highly plausible. It's a highly plausible outcome that whatever is to happen, if we're to see a ritual really close to this election or during it, that it could possibly lead to momentary civil unrest. So no matter who wins, if it's Harris or Trump, the real winner is still the undefeated champion, Zionism. And I'm sure many of you agree this upcoming election will probably be the most controversial of all time. And since it's the second time in history a woman is nominated for president and will be the final, making it to the final voting process, and not just a candidate like, who was that, Victoria Woodhull, like back in the 1800s, then this brings me to the connection with the 49ers and the Chiefs that I just made earlier, where the Chiefs won both Super Bowls against the 49ers. Perhaps Trump wins both presidential elections against a woman, whom were both Democrats. You had Hillary, and then now you have Harris, both names with H as well. So just saying, that's one way that I'm starting to perceive it. Trump wins both presidential elections against a woman. Both Democrats, both H in their name. H is the ladder. This ladder, oh man, that would be so much more decoding, but I'm going to keep it simple, all right? So let's get back to the Chiefs and 49ers ritual. The Chiefs here would be symbolic of Trump, as Missouri voted Republican or red in both of Trump's prior elections, and I would assume this time is no different, of course, Kansas City being in the state of Missouri, the home of the Chiefs. And the 49ers are in San Francisco and California, which in the last 8 elections ended up being a Democratic state regarding the election turnout, and also likely to be the same case this time around as well. And California has been on a downfall lately. It's clearly being sacrificed by the apex predator, especially places like San Francisco, the Bay Area, which is all part of their script. It's all part of their grand plan. Problem, reaction, solution, the Hegelian. Even that new movie that came out called The Creator, it starts off showing you the city of Los Angeles getting nuked and essentially destroyed by a quote-unquote war against AI robots. Pretty wild movie. Check it out if you have any free time. Now, getting back to this connection between the recent Super Bowls, remember this: Chiefs are being put through a big part of this script. The year prior to this Super Bowl, the Chiefs won against the Eagles, and this was a very close game. Let me quickly get to that. Also, I hope you guys are enjoying today's Red Pill podcast. So as you can see here, Chiefs beat the Eagles by 3 points in a very close final game, 38-35. I remember this Super Bowl because I decoded it. This 38-35, it adds up to 73, 21st prime, tied back to Saturn, 21. They were calling Patrick Mahomes the Grim Reaper. That's Saturn. This is a lot of Saturnian energy tied to this. And the eagle is Mercury, Hermes. And this was all telling us that the fiat money system is going away, tied to Mercury. And we're bringing in a new system. And that was also evident in the 49ers losing, because the 49ers are symbolic of gold mining, and gold is physical precious metals, obviously, and the physical world is going away and being replaced by the new system. And that, yeah, I did a full decode actually on this Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl. If you guys would like to look for it here in the Patreon, Patreon exclusive content, you'll definitely be able to find it. Just type in Super Bowl into the search engine, and under my content, you'll find it. So getting back to this script that's playing out here, the only Super Bowl the Eagles ever won was in the NFL season of 2017, which is the year that Trump started his term after he won that election in 2016. Then Trump loses the election against Biden, and the next Super Bowl the Eagles are in, they lose. It's a script. Then, because this year's Super Bowl went into overtime, it's making me think that this upcoming election will also, quote unquote, go into overtime. And I'll break that down in a moment. So the first ever Super Bowl that went into overtime was the Falcons against the Patriots. I believe it was Super Bowl 51. This was the first Super Bowl to ever go into overtime. And Falcons against the Patriots, interestingly enough, the Patriots won this Super Bowl. Then the following year was the one where the Eagles won their first Super Bowl. Let me bring that up. Super Bowl 52. And they beat the Patriots. Interesting. Think about this, guys. So, Eagles, symbolic of the connection to Trump. They win, Trump wins, then they lose, Trump loses. This whole kind of sequence of energy is also including the same team of the Patriots. Now, the Patriots, you would assume, are symbolic of Trump, right? Because the Patriot is what everybody is called when they support the conservatives, right? That's typically how it's going. Now, I know that there's many ways to look at this, but I think the sporting events is one of the most powerful, because these events get a lot of energy, and the energy gets summoned and turned into a magic ritual. You know, it's funny to bring this up because I was just having a conversation with somebody about, is it Mount Vesuvius? And that area of around Naples, Italy is, well, very lots of, what is it called? Lots of volcanic activity, right? Tons of volcanic activity, and it is potentially going to just erupt soon. And that's very troubling for me to hear. You know, it would be not just an Italy problem, it would be a Europe problem, and it could potentially even be a global problem if that was to be the case. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but it's pretty alarming to hear some of the stories about what's going on. And the oceans have started to like bubble a little bit, and tourists who've been there have brought it up, like the smell of sulfur coming out of the ground, all this geothermal activity, you know? Anyways, then I heard that Madonna just did her recent birthday at was it Pompeii or Mount Vesuvius? I'm not sure on the exacts. You guys could look this up, but I'm like, this is it, guys. They know of the energy they're working with, and they're black magicians. They're wizards and warlocks and magi. Like, they're just using the energy, siphoning all the energy, and then using it to do what they do. Anyways, getting back to this. Pretty fascinating how this was the first Super Bowl to ever go into overtime with the Patriots. And then the following year, we have this Super Bowl with the Eagles. And then if you went in reverse, you have the Super Bowl where the Eagles lose. And then the next Super Bowl goes into overtime. The second Super Bowl ever. It's like working like a palindrome. I hope this makes sense. It's a similar script. So we had this Super Bowl, first ever to go into overtime, the Falcons against the Patriots, and the Patriots won Super Bowl 51. Then the following year, the Eagles won their first Super Bowl against the Patriots in Super Bowl 52. This is a very similar script for Tom Brady, as we're seeing play out now with Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback of the Chiefs. Because between 2015 and 2019, the Patriots won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years with 4 Super Bowl appearances. And now we have the Chiefs winning 3 Super Bowls in the past 5 years with 4 Super Bowl appearances. And that one Super Bowl the Chiefs lost in the past 5 years was in 2021 against the Buccaneers, who were led by no other than Tom Brady, the ex-quarterback for the Patriots, which syncs perfectly with this decode. So Trump has 2 elections he's been part of. He won the first one, lost the second one. Just like Tom Brady wins the first Super Bowl in overtime in this one connection, and then loses the second one. And then comes back to play for the Buccaneers and wins, to beat the team that's been winning lately. Again, all part of this script. And tying Trump to the C-19 ritual time frame of 2020, where he lost against Biden, and now he's facing a woman again for his 3rd election cycle. I hope this is all coming together to make sense. So the Eagles won Super Bowl 52, and then they lose against the Chiefs last year. The Chiefs then win their second Super Bowl against the 49ers from their rematch in 2020, the year C-19 started, and the election cycle Trump lost. And now we're back here with a rematch of Trump against a woman. The woman lost the first time around, Hillary Clinton, and the big question is, will the ritual be complete with a woman losing for a second time in a row? But the issue is, will it be a situation like the 2000 election with delayed results, similar to this overtime concept that I've brought up? Because the year of 2000 was a dragon year, and back in 2000 it was a 5-week delay for that recount in the Bush versus Gore election. Imagine that was to happen in this upcoming election with today's turbulence and volatility regarding the division amongst the American people and the division on the world stage as a whole. There's a lot of stuff going down right now, guys. I mean, immigrants are being sent back by the busload from places like Hungary to Brussels. You know, like, there's so much craziness happening right now. Freaking, Venezuelan gangs taking over Colorado. I mean, it's madness. There's so much unfolding. Lots of division, people not knowing what they want to do right now. Market is in crazy bubble territory. Hyperinflation is out of control. So it's bringing a lot of confusion into the equation. And just 3 weeks after this election that will be on the 5th of November will be Trump's sentencing date, or the new sentencing date. Since the original date of September 18th, about 10 days from now, was delayed. And now we have this theory we're building here making even more sense for potential delayed election results. So if I had to bring all of this data together, I'd consider these 3 potential scenarios. You could write them down. Scenario number 1 would be Trump wins in a typical election vibe, which provides fairly quick results and things are all good in the hood. It's probably the best outcome. Scenario number 2, some ritual happens either right before or during the election, which creates an issue with the votes, and we have the year 2000 all over again, a recount and delayed results. This is a mixed bag because there could be potential civil unrest during this delay, and definitely room for civil unrest depending on what the specific ritual causes this delay, or if there's just a ritual right before the election happens in general. You understand? That could cause momentary civil unrest. Now, please know that I'm not trying to say we're going to go into like some Hunger Games world right away. I'm just saying something that could be like the Trump assassination attempt, but instead of it failing, it actually pulls through. Consider not that same event, but of that magnitude. Okay, now you have scenario number 3. Kamala wins with quick results, no delay, and there's civil unrest due to the patriots not wanting to accept that particular outcome, as well as a similar shared feeling from ex-liberals who were let down by the Biden administration, and they switched sides over the past couple of years, which has led to even more popularity for Trump. Something to consider. And most people would be shocked if Kamala won by a sizable amount. So the apex predator knows they need to play this game in a very specific way. Scenario 2 and 3 could actually both have Kamala win. And I don't see it turning out pretty. Not that I'm trying to say that Trump winning is a good thing, because you all know my stance in this is I am neutral. I don't believe in presidents. I believe that you should lead yourself, your household, your people, your family. You don't need a president. This is all a sham. But again, I'm just answering frequently asked questions, letting you know where I stand on this and what the consequences of it all could be. So I'm not saying Trump winning is a good thing, but because this is all political theater anyways, but all that would concern, what would concern me is how volatile the streets could get depending on who wins. And I feel a Harris win could bring violence, and clearly her policies would hurt investors, it would hurt the crypto industry. So most semi-wealthy people, and definitely actually wealthy people, or younger entrepreneurs or investors, especially crypto investors, would not be happy with this outcome. I've even heard about potential taxing of uncapitalized gains. I mean, dude, nobody would be cool with that. So whilst the Trump victory could be celebrated by many from a business or tax or crypto or investing or even a geopolitical perspective, that all sounds like a lot less violence, a lot more, I don't want to say harmony, because that's like a little too hopeful. I'm not trying to spread hopium here. I'm trying to be neutral, but it would be the lesser of the volatile outcomes. Again, none of this that I'm sharing right now is to spread any fear. It's just to share my thoughts and decode for this cultural moment of the US election, which many of you have asked me my opinion on. So let's wrap up our Year of the Dragon analysis, moving on to the year 1952. But before we do that, let's just show how 1964, Year of the Wood Dragon, we had a little bit of a correction in the month of August, a clean W pattern which broke out bullish, and then we were up all the way through the election, actually. A little bit of a correction in December, which is unusual, and then we extended out all the way until May, bullish, maintaining an uptrend, a very clean uptrend too. Which, by the way, we're having a very clean uptrend at this moment as well. If we were to look at, for instance, the S&P, like if you just zoom out, just zoom out. I know that we had a big correction recently. I know we had a big correction in August. I know we had a pretty sizable correction in April, but like we're in an uptrend. So until the trend changes, nothing to be freaking out about. Now we're going over to 1952. I'm going to quickly just take a sip of water and then we'll continue. All right, we have 1952, also a Year of the Dragon that's synchronized with a Shemitah year. Not the most usual synchronicity, but it was the case. And an incredibly bullish year of the dragon. But we see that we made it up into August, early August. Let me pull this up and show you how we actually topped out in August recently as well. Then we had this correction into late October, followed by a push into new all-time highs at the very beginning of 1953, near the end of the year of the dragon. And we were actually quite down in the year of the snake, but it's fascinating how this uptrend maintained all the way until the end of the year of the snake, or the Gregorian New Year. Let's move down to 1940. This was a very tumultuous period because it was World War II. So here we are. We have right here is where we are today, around September 8th-ish, September 9th. You could see that we did have a pretty decent pullback in September. A little bit of recovery and chop all the way until the eclipse, which happened in October 1st. Funny enough, we have an eclipse on October 2nd, so our eclipses are matching, as well as Rosh Hashanah. And then we have a push up into November with a new all-time high, but that was right around the election, I suppose, and then this went down. And we were actually going on a much deeper and doomy downtrend. So I'm going to stop here, but it seems to clearly show a pattern that in Q4 is usually where we top out, or the very beginning of the new year. That's what a lot of these year of the dragon cycles show us. And then we also have the election year data, which shows during the December month, very positive results. October, November are sort of a mixed bag because of speculation on who's going to win the elections. And then after January, or after December, we're going to go back to these blue bars. And you can see that the bar for January in a non-election year is bullish. So I'm feeling out that pattern as well. But of course, I think a big piece to all of this is the upcoming solar eclipse in October, which now we're going to get into the Bitcoin analysis. So, Bitcoin. I think it's fair to start out with drawing what pattern we're playing, and that is a bull flag. So it doesn't need to be super clean. If I put candles, it'll look a lot more noticeable. We're playing out a bull flag, and it's still in play, and it's been in play since pretty much the start of this horizontal trading range, which goes back over almost 200 days now, over 190 days, and we're back testing pretty much the break after we had the approval of the Bitcoin ETFs. So I think it's pretty fascinating how if you look at the day of the Bitcoin ETFs launching, the first day, we've effectively back tested it on the August new moon flash crash. And now we're really at this scary point where we're hovering around the supports that go back to July, and we haven't really reversed this downtrend. We are making lower highs and lower lows, and it's been perpetual for a half a year now. So this next drive to the downside that we just experienced after this recent new moon is not so fun to experience. I get it. We have been sideways for a while now. We are back in fear mode for the most part. A lot of money has left the crypto market. A lot of those gains that came in Q1 have now been returned back to the market maker. And that's how this market is designed. There was a need for a sideways and down or boredom phase, or just being scared, a scary phase, especially in new asset classes such as cryptocurrency. So consider that we're still in this pattern. It's still playing out. We have a couple weeks out before we have the fourth solar eclipse of our solar cycle, or the last solar eclipse of our solar cycle. And we've seen how it's gone time and time again. I've showed you in my work how this goes. We don't really need to spend too much time looking at it, but I'll just show you really quickly. Here is the last solar eclipse of your solar cycle, and look at what that led to. Over here is the last solar eclipse of your solar cycle. Look at what that led to. Here is the last solar eclipse of the solar cycle. Look at what that led to. Every time. Now, could this time be different? Of course. Am I confident that it will be much different? No, not based on the data, and also for the fact that Bitcoin has been sideways for so long now. The one thing that I am kind of happy about, though, is the whole narrative tied to the Bitcoin ETF was shaken out. And now all those people that were riding on that theory that it was a bullish thing, they're all silent again. And that's great. Not that I want to be the guy who's right, but I want to be in truth. And whenever something's popular, as Oscar Wilde says, popular is wrong. So we're through that now. All of the people that were just here for a quick buck are gone. They've capitulated. All the people who were under this belief and spellcasting that the Bitcoin ETF and BlackRock's involvement and all this shit was going to somehow send us to the moon, they're quiet. They've capitulated. It's been a full sentiment reset across the board, and that's a good time for a wolf to get excited. So I'm not convinced just yet to be full-blown excitement mode because of course, the data we're working with and the fact that we're still down in the mid-50s. But of course, I would like to see a break of trend, which would require us to get back above 64K again. Of course. But when zooming out, we're still looking pretty damn good. So let's look at a couple of the key factors in our current trading range. We're far below our key moving averages. All of these moving averages have moved into a bearish posture. But now let's look up the time frames and see what we can find. We have a back test on the 200 exponential. It's looking pretty good. Holding support there would be ideal. Look at the 3-day. We're much above the 200s. We did get below our key EMAs, so that's not looking too good, but we're still holding support nonetheless. That's not good. I don't like to see that wolf cross. We had a wolf cross with the 8 above the 55 just a couple of 5-day closes ago. Not good. Bitcoin needs to bounce soon. The wolf cross has yet to happen on the weekly chart, and we're coming up against a weekly close as we speak. We're at 54,400, and the lowest weekly close we saw back in July was at 56K, and we're below that. The Bitcoin CME is actually about where we're trading right now, so we won't see any gaps, but this is not a good sign. The only thing that is hope at this point is the fact that we're in that bull flag pattern that I started this analysis with, but we are not looking the best when it comes to some of these weekly closures. Oh man, yeah, we're about to close a 2-week. Not looking good. This 2-week closing below the 21 I don't like because we had a back test on July. We had a back test over here in August 12th. And now we're potentially going to be closing below it unless Bitcoin could get bought back up to 56K, which would have been the lows on the weekly candle closure. Not good. This is really starting to get a little arduous and a little overdrawn out, So it's one of those situations where yes, we are technically back testing the high range of the prior bull run, which are these two tops right here, but we've been spending a little too long up here. It's getting a little bit more on the uncomfortable side. So let's get to the daily. Let's see where we're at with the Bollinger Bands. We're closing dailies below the bands. Today we're holding support at the bottom side band, but we've yet to really break the top. Coiling up on the 3-day, these bands are coiling up. 5-day, these bands are really starting to coil up. Even on the weekly, they're starting to squeeze. So when the weekly are squeezing together like that, that's showing you that we're at historically low volatility. And probably the last time they've squeezed this much together was the same time of year back in 2023. And that led to a pretty dramatic breakout. And that was also in alignment with the October solar eclipse. So it would be interesting to see if we have a repeat of 2023 in this time frame moving into October. Solar eclipse, and then we also had this sideways phase too before that solar eclipse that launched us up. And then we have the end of Saturn retrograde as well. We have the final Mercury retrograde of the year, which tends to be pretty bullish. This is all stuff that I've gone over, but we need to make it through this FOMC meeting to see what role the traditional markets have on this. it almost seems this particular year of the dragon is like a month off from the main pattern. So perhaps we're getting our big corrective phase into October, right around the upcoming eclipse. And then once we make it through the October lunar eclipse, that's when the market starts to recover bullish again, which is something that I also brought up in my pair of lunar eclipses data. And we don't have another, I brought this up during the Bearable Bull podcast. The fact that we have November 7th is a FOMC meeting right after the election. It's like, these guys are evil, bro. They're going to wait till there's chaos in the election, and then they're going to come swoop in and do what they do. It's fucking hilarious. Anyways, yeah, lots of chop. Not the sexiest weekly close coming in, but if we can hold this right here, if we can hold 51, I know that sounds dramatic, guys, but we've already peaked into there on a flash correction. If we can hold 52K on the weekly closes, I'm feeling okay. If we start closing below 52K, that's where I'm not going to be as happy. I think closing back into the previous trading range here, which only lasted about a week to 2 weeks, not good. You know, we really need a bottom out soon and start some bullish recovery. Now let's look at where Ethereum is. Wow. Ethereum has made it back into its previous trading range, and we're okay until we are to close a weekly candle below 2,200. We're at 2,300 right now, barely. Not good. And I believe just recently I heard about Van Eck has canceled and basically got rid of their Ethereum ETF. For whatever reason, I guess not enough client interest, and they weren't ready to play with this volatility. It's crypto, and most retail is not ready to deal with this shit, you know? So consider yourself the few. And I'm not actually surprised to hear that Van Eck did that. They are playing the confidence game when it comes to managing other people's money, and people just want confidence. Think about it. A lot of what's been going on in the market regarding housing is just a bubble that's been perpetuated by BlackRock. So all that confidence that's there for those type of investors, it's like, what is it held up by? It's held up by the printing press just injecting an infinite amount of loans into BlackRock with a very low interest rates for them. It's like free money. And they bought up the whole world. They're buying up all the land. So if you're on the right side of the trade, you get to ride the wave. But if you're in something like an Ethereum ETF and you've watched, 40% of your position keel over, you're like, fuck this shit. I don't want to deal with this. And that's what a lot of retail investors get sucked into. Again, I was always telling people to be careful with this belief of the post-ETF approval bullish energy. That's just not what I anticipated, and I was not really stoked about hearing the involvement of these institutions in crypto. First of all, wasn't the whole point of crypto decentralized blockchain technology, peer-to-peer money, and us being custodians of our own private keys and our own cash flow? Geez, right? Like, it was so weird in the beginning of this year watching so many people that just got bullish on institutions because they had money in the belief that we'll just keep going up and up and up. It's not safe, man. It's not safe. Anyways, ETH is not looking good right now. I do not like the fact that we had this momentary support here at about 2,800 and then we broke through it, came back to it, and got rejected. That's not looking good. This is really about as deep as we should go. If we were to start closing below 2,200 on a weekly close, I think we're going to enter some trouble for the entire crypto market. So this needs to be bought up pretty quickly. Now, looking at this chart for XRP, we know that we have our major support somewhere around 58 or 48 to 49 cents. We're about 52 right now. We're in the middle of this trading range. We've been sideways for pretty much as long as we were sideways in the last phase 5. Again, the measurement I used initially was from the first touch point of the top of the range to the first touch point at the bottom of the range, however you want to consider such, and then measuring it out that amount of days. This is like the analysis that I shared a couple months ago. It doesn't really matter how long we take. It just matters when we break out of the phase. So if we were to start closing lower than we did in July, then this would be invalidated. Or it would just be like the final shakeout. It's hard to tell though. When that final shakeout comes in, are we in the midst of it? Or is it something that could be tied to an event, right? Because we had the C19 crash, that was tied to an event. We all know it, right? The world shut down, lots of mayhem in the markets, confusion, uncertainty, everything sold off, right? Well, who's to say that that's impossible to happen again? Some sort of black swan event. Anything's possible in the matrix. But what we're feeling is if there was to be an event, it's likely just to launch us up into a breakout phase in regards to a bullish breakout. Right now, the phase we're in is called boredom. It has been just chop for the most part. Lots of people giving up on investing, and that's a sign that they should have never gotten into this to begin with, because if you think investing is just an easy way to make money, then no wonder that 90% of market participants lose, because they lack patience, they lack investment thesis, they lack wealth planning, and they lack developing their own skills. They spend time just following others, and that's not what we talk about here on this channel. We're talking about self-reliance. So let's move over to our altcoins for today, starting with Arbitrum. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I do not know if I've ever done TA on this, but I can tell you right away, we have a problem. This is in price discovery to the downside. It topped out January of 2024, which is quite interesting, and that was about the time frame of the Bitcoin ETF approval. Topped out on the same day. And it's since had an 80% mid-cycle correction, which is like a full bear market almost, perpetually trending to the downside. Let's see if we can get a little bit of a trend line action going, which it seems clear to me. I'm also going to pull a fib from the swing high down to the swing low. Double click. Make sure this setting is turned on, and we're at the bottom, so we need to wait for a bullish pivot. Until we could get back above this 382, we're just in a perpetual correction. Lower lows over and over and over again. What we need to watch out for is this right here, the fact that we had this W pattern break. W supports, big move to the upside, which could effectively be this momentary selling climax. And then when we return back to it over here at the same level, you see how we broke deep, broke lower, another leg lower, then we gravitated back to this line and got rejected. This was a sign to GTFO, and we came down even lower. This is the key level now to consider for a bullish trend reversal. So you would keep 83 cents in mind. If we could recover back above 83 cents, well, then we would be in a trend. We would be probably more in an energy reversal and heading back up into this golden pocket territory, somewhere around $1.70 or so. And that has a lot to do with this launch kind of initial bullish move, and then also the last bullish price before it came down into a corrective phase. So hope this is all making sense. Very nice and simple technical analysis. And then you have this falling trend line, which we've come up against once, twice, 3 times, 4 times a charm. What would be nice to see is a move like this. So you would have break above, retest on the outside, and then if we could get back into this area, a final break. But consider, coming above this trend line could still lead to a back test and like a fake out. People would think that we're going to go lower, but in actuality, we actually are just back testing a prior resistance, confirming it as a new support, and then pushing up into a recovery. Let's move on to Spell Token. All right, so this is something that we've done TA on before. Kind of an annoying chart because it has this scam wick that we have to work around, but it's an easy fix. Now, you can see that I had this trend line here, and this is not good. The fact that I'm zooming in now to this trend line, we were holding it, bounce, coming back to it, and then now we've rejected below it. So you see right here, the way that I've just slightly adjusted it, this hits the most touch points. All of the lows then comes back, and this rejection right here was lights out. So not good to see that. This is a big sign of weakness. But overall, what it's doing is it's kind of cementing its macro double bottom. So I suspect that if this thing could just hold higher lows at least and not trade lower than this level over here, which came in around September of 2023 last year, that it's not bad. It's just bottoming still. It's still in the bear market low area. And it's probably double bottom in its final phase. Key level to look out for would naturally be right around this 382. Of course, we have this rejection here, and we have these rejections here, about 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll show you the levels here with a horizontal ray, like that. Okay, so you see over here this launch level, rejection, 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 and then the final rejection before coming down. Meaning if you could clear this horizontal resistance, boom, it's game time. And I'd suspect this actually has quite a ways. Yeah, if you look at this, if you were to catch this level today and we were to make it up to the 888 fib, which is asking for a lot, but that would be about a 3,000% move. Just getting back to the top of the golden pocket would give you a 2,000% move. So if we are to have expansion in the altcoins, this is like one of those venture capital plays where like you're not going to be confident in. The reason why is there's no fucking chart history. There's no prior bull run to really, play on. Of course, we do have this surge to the upside over here, but look at when it was launched. It was launched in 2021, a year plus after the C19 crash. It hasn't lived through a black swan event, so we can't really bank on it with confidence. And plus, like, really, what is the token? I mean, we all know none of this shit has any use case anyway, so we just call it venture capital. Get a small like 0.5 to 1.5% of your overall portfolio. For some people, it ends up being like $100, $50, maybe $200, money that you're willing to watch go to zero. But if it does really well, goes up 2,000%. I mean, you do the math. $150, 2,000%, not bad. $3K. Off of a small amount, a very small amount. So, these are like the little goes a long way. But if it was to drop further and continue lower and lower and lower, can't say I didn't warn you. This is nonsense. This is all just playing the game of hope a lot of the time. So venture capital is the way to go. And that's why I've designed my portfolio the way I have. And if you don't know about my portfolio, go rewatch the last What I'm Investing in special. I just did it quite recently, actually. I go very deep into my own investment thesis and why I invest the way that I do. Now we're going over to Chili's. Funny thing for it to be called. Spicy token. Okay, here's your March 20 crash. Here's how high it's gone since, and we're at new lows right now. So even though this has been on a 4-year effectively downtrend, if you bought the bottom of the last cycle or around the supports of the last cycle, you would still be up 700 to 900%. That's pretty good. Now the thing is how long is this going to keep breaking lower and lower and lower? Because you could see low, higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low. Low, lower low, lower low, and recently a lower low. This is a crazy bull flag, but it's also nothing really bullish. Let's look at the total losses from high. 95%, so this is really taking its time. Let's look at the weekly. I'm going to draw it like this. It's much cleaner. Crazy bull flag. It's not going to look clean on the daily, but you just looked at me do it on the bi-weekly candle, so a lot more data. Anytime we drop below this lower support, it's led to a pretty decent rally. Over here, for instance, over here, for instance, over here, for instance. But the problem is the rally is short-lived and then it just goes lower. So low confidence play, not a lot of bullish momentum at all, and if it is, it's momentary. We get one of these distributional tops, comes back to the bottom of the trading range, and This could keep going and going until it gets back over here. Let me show you the horizontal level to keep in mind if this thing just wanted to keep giving back all of its value. You see this? Rejection, 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 rejection before blast off. If this bullshit wants to keep, losing its value, it could go all the way down to 2 cents again. Why not? That would be the last level of prior resistance. So just keep in mind, this 2 cent level. I've watched a bull run happen in 2021 where a lot of altcoins did well and some didn't. So not everything has to ride the wave. Most things do. I'm not saying this thing won't. It did in the last cycle, sorta. But just keep an eye out on this stuff. This is venture capital, very, very speculative, and not confidence. No confidence in this at all. Key level to keep in mind to break would not only be the top of the bull flag, but it would be this whole cluster over here between, let's just call it Q1 into Q2 of 2024, somewhere around 14 cents. If it could close a weekly candle above 15 cents, then we could have a trend reversal and retests of around the 888 fib level at like 65 cents. Let's move on to Pepe token. A very solid performing token this year, and I'm not making a joke, I'm being serious. It performed really well. I'm going to remove this parallel channel now while I'm on film so you guys can see that this parallel channel has effectively broke, and now we're on a little bit of a reversal energy, or what could potentially be a fucking bull flag, which would be crazy to watch that play out on this project. But hey, we're in meme world and memes do well. So since the October solar eclipse, this thing has gone up almost 1,000% to this day, 10x, and it moved up 2,500%. So one of the best performers, again, showing you the memery is still active here in crypto land. Where we're trading at today is a very important level. It is the 1618. And now the reason why I would have a hard time personally investing in this thing is because it made it all the way up to the 4236. I would not want to invest in something that has already hit the 4236 and has come back to the 1618. It's just like, how much more room do you have ahead, right? I mean, I don't know. Nobody knows. I don't know if this could pull a Shiba Inu and just keep going and going and going and going and have like 4 alt seasons in one bull run. But this had its time to shine. I'm not entirely sure if it has the same essence behind it as it once did, because WatersAbove is not getting caught up in the meme groups. I'm not against the stuff. It's a trading opportunity, but this had its cultural moment. Now where are we at with this mid-cycle correction? I would assume at least 50%. Okay, about 60% as we speak. So that's pretty typical actually for a mid-cycle correction. I just wouldn't feel weird buying something that's trading in price discovery. Like literally, it's in bullish price discovery. It's not reverse trend yet though. Until we start closing weekly candles below this level of April 2024, I mean, this shit's holding pretty well. And it's been holding sideways for about as long as Bitcoin's been in a bullish phase. Pretty much at the second to third initial stage of our bull recovery, the recovery phase of our bull run. So I'm going to be wrapping up this with one more. Is it Coinbase stock? But quickly, I just want to say that where we're at right now, it's a very precarious level, because I've seen after something hits the 4236 and makes it back to the 1618, if it can't hold the golden ratio, it could sometimes peel back into the top of the golden pocket, which would be a correction all the way to the top of the 786. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, especially if Bitcoin can get its shit together and recover soon. Of course, dominance will be sucked away from altcoins. But if a real alt season kicks in again after Bitcoin enters price discovery, then things like Pepe will do very well. It will ride the wave. I have no doubt about it. I'm just not sure how much upside potential it has. I would just keep my eye on the bottom of this bull flag, and you could keep that in mind for Any potential breakouts, half staff would get you up to the 6-spot fib extension. And I have in the last cycle seen a 10 spot. So if that was to be the case, you're looking at another 400 or 500% move. But remember what I showed you with Arbitrum, that's like a what, like a 2000 or spell token. I forgot which one it is. It's like a 2000% move just to get back to the golden pocket, let alone need to rely on more and more price discovery. Although, of course, there's narratives behind all of these things. Let's go to our final stock, coin. Wow, pretty crazy. So I haven't looked at this in a hot minute, but when it did first come out, I was, of course, reviewing it for the community. We've had a full 91% correction into the end of 2022, pivoted perfectly at the beginning of 2023, had an amazing 800% move into the recent Great American Eclipse, and then since have had a pretty big correction for a stock, about 50%. So it's still as volatile as a crypto, even though it was IPO'd and it's a crypto exchange. Still tons of volatility. I mean, look at this, 40% move in 70 days. Here, another 30, almost 40% move in 33 days. Here, we've had in just a half a year of 50% correction. Or no, not even if I pulled it from here, it's even quicker. 45 days, 45% correction. Crazy. Okay, so keep your eye on the bottom of the golden pocket. That's a very clean level to hold after a pretty drastic correction. And we're now entering oversold territory on the RSI. This correction's probably due to get a little bit of bottoming very, very soon. I would suspect we could drop even further, maybe to around $1.20. Wick into the 0.5 fib if this wants to get really bloody, but we should hold trend on the weeklies. So until we start closing a weekly below the January 22nd lows, which would be like below $120 a share, that's when that would get troublesome. But we're holding the trend. Probably broke this trend line though. Sure did. That's not good. That's not good at all. So yeah, a lot of these charts are starting to look pretty rough, and it's a sign that liquidity is leaving. And a lot of the more speculative investors, like people that are interested in crypto, for instance, and Coinbase, of course, being the big main crypto exchange, it doesn't shock me that if we get a market correction, we're going to see it hit this sector pretty rough. I mean, ever since the FTX thing, that's been the case. And we haven't had like a hero in the cryptocurrency narrative in a long time. The last time we had one was the Elon guy, And then once we had that SNL skit, now it's the opposite. Now no one cares what he has to say about crypto, and the Dogecoin narrative isn't as hot, So yeah, we are in a moment right now where it's very, very confusing. And when it gets confusing and when it gets scary and when people start to capitulate is when the apex predator, when the market maker turns things around. So if you're someone who's getting discouraged by this all right now, just deep breaths. Know that you got into investing in the most volatile asset classes pretty much in the most volatile time ever. You have to become calm about this. You are surrounded by a group of like-minded, conscious beings. Tap into the community, ask questions, and everyone who's providing feedback, try to be neutral and balanced in your responses. Don't be dramatic. Don't cause any drama around here. You know what I mean. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast and today's decode. Got into a lot today. We have this big week ahead, big 2 weeks ahead actually, and we're coming up on one of the most controversial election cycles pretty much of all time. So I don't know about you, but I am excited to see how all of this stuff goes down on the world stage. We are here together experiencing it as a community. I think that's a beautiful thing. Really appreciate and grateful for all of your support, and the support we all provide to each other here is so rare and incredible to watch. What we're doing is special. Let's keep everything pure. Let's keep everything drama-free, and let's continue to track this whole bull run week by week. I hope you guys all have an amazing rest of your weekend in the Matrix. Much love.